The massive space station turned slowly in the darkness between two star systems. Concordia Prime was built for moments like this, when species needed neutral ground to talk instead of fight. Its silver halls stretched for miles in every direction, filled with meeting rooms where the future of entire worlds got decided. Admiral Jake Morrison walked down the long corridor toward the main chamber. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. Behind him, Ambassador Lisa Grant carried a data pad full of numbers and maps and treaty proposals. They had been working on these peace talks for 3 weeks now, and Jake could feel the weight of every single day. The chamber doors opened with a quiet hiss. Inside, representatives from 12 different species sat around a circular table that could have held a small city. The Zephyrians took up the largest section, their blue-scaled bodies gleaming under the bright lights. Their leader, General Vexler, had arms as thick as tree trunks and eyes like yellow gems. He looked at Jake the way someone might look at an insect. Chancellor Morden called the session to order. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light. His voice carried across the chamber like the sound of distant thunder. We continue today with the territorial disputes between the human colonies and the Zephyrian expansion fleet. Jake took his seat at the small section marked for Earth's delegation. The table was so big that he could barely see the faces on the other side. This was supposed to show equality among all species, but Jake knew better. The size of your section told everyone exactly how much the council thought you mattered. Admiral Morrison, Chancellor Morden said, please present your terms again for the record. Jake stood up slowly. He had given this same speech a dozen times, but he would give it again. The United Earth Federation seeks mutual recognition of all established colonies. We want shared trade routes that benefit everyone. We want non-aggression pacts that keep our people safe. We want to be neighbors, not enemies. General Vexler made a sound that might have been laughter if it came from a human throat. The boy speaks of wants like a child asking for sweets. The galaxy does not care what humans want. General Vexler, Ambassador Grant said, her voice calm and professional, we believe these terms benefit all parties involved. Our colonies have been established for over 50 years. Our people have built lives there. The Zephyrian general leaned forward, his massive frame making the reinforced chair creak. Your people built homes on worlds that belong to the Empire. The fact that you were allowed to stay this long shows our mercy. Jake felt his hands clench into fists under the table. He had seen those colonies. He had walked through cities where human children played in parks their grandparents had built. He had met farmers who grew food in soil their families had worked for decades. These were not temporary settlements. These were home. What are your counterterms? Chancellor Morden asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Would be accepted regardless. General Vexler pulled out a crystal data device and activated it. A holographic map appeared above the table, showing star systems in red and blue. The Empire requires complete human withdrawal from the Kepler, Vega, and Centauri systems within 1 standard year. All human military vessels will be limited to patrol craft only. Earth will provide tribute payments of rare metals annually. These terms are generous. The chamber fell silent. Jake stared at the map, watching as 3 entire star systems turned. From blue to red, millions of humans lived in those systems. They had farms and factories and schools and hospitals. They had built something beautiful out of empty space and hostile worlds. Those systems contain over 40 million human citizens, Jake said. Where exactly do you expect them to go? That is not the Empire's concern, General Vexler replied. Perhaps they should have thought of that before settling on Imperial territory, Ambassador Grant leaned forward. With respect, General, those systems were unclaimed when our colony ships arrived. We followed all established protocols for territorial expansion. Protocols written by species who no longer matter, General Vexler said. The galaxy has new rules now. Chancellor Morden raised one long finger. The Council recognizes that territorial disputes often require adjustment as circumstances change. Newer species must learn their place in the galactic hierarchy. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He looked around the chamber at the faces of the other species. Representatives. Some looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. None of them were willing to challenge the Zephyrians, even when they were watching the slow destruction of everything humanity had built among the stars. "We need time to consider these terms," Jake said. General Vexler's laugh was like rocks grinding together. "Time is what got you into this situation, Admiral. Your primitive tin cans drift through space at the speed of barely evolved apes. Your soldiers carry weapons that would not impress children. Your species has no concept of real power." The insult hung in the air like smoke. Jake had served in Earth's Navy for 30 years. He had commanded ships in battles against pirates and rebels. He had seen what human courage could accomplish when everything seemed hopeless. But looking around this chamber, surrounded by species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, he wondered if the general might be right. "The Council will now vote on the Zephyrian proposal," Chancellor Morden announced. 1. By 1, the representatives activated their voting crystals. Green meant support for the proposal, red meant opposition. Jake watched as green lights appeared across the chamber like stars coming out at night. When the count finished, the result was 11 votes in favor and 1 opposed. Only Earth had voted against giving up everything they had built in space. "The motion passes," Chancellor Morden said. "The human delegation has 48 hours to formally accept these terms and begin implementation." Jake stood up slowly. Around the table, representatives were already talking among themselves, moving on to other business as if the lives of 40 million humans were just another item on their agenda. He gathered his papers and datapads with careful, deliberate movements. "Admiral," General Vexler called out, "I hope your species will accept reality gracefully. It would be unfortunate if enforcement became necessary." Jake looked across the massive table at the Zephyrian general. For a moment their eyes met. Jake saw confidence there, and contempt, and the absolute certainty of someone who had never lost a fight. Then Jake smiled, and something in that smile made General Vexler's expression flicker just slightly. "We came here seeking peace as equals," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. "Since that is impossible, we withdraw from these proceedings. Humanity will determine its own path forward." He turned and walked toward the doors with Ambassador Grant beside him. Behind them, the chamber erupted in surprised voices and confused murmurs. No species had ever simply walked away from a council decision before. As the doors closed behind them, Jake could hear General Vexler's voice rising above the others. "Let them go. They will learn the price of defying the Empire soon enough." But Jake was already thinking about the long journey back to Earth, and the conversations that would happen when he arrived. The Zephyrians thought they knew what humanity was capable of. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The towers of Dominax reached toward the purple sky like spears thrown by giants. Each one was taller than mountains, built from materials that could survive the blast of dying stars. This was the heart of the Zephyrian Empire, where decisions were made that affected 1,000 worlds. Deep inside the tallest tower, Fleet Admiral Kethver studied the holographic display floating above his command table. The display showed human space as a collection of small blue dots scattered across several star systems. Each dot represented a colony or outpost or military base. There were not very many of them. "The humans have rejected our generous terms," Intelligence Director Zalmos said as he entered the briefing room. His scaled head gleamed under the harsh lights, and his yellow eyes held the satisfaction of someone who had predicted exactly this outcome. "Of course they did," Admiral Kethver replied without looking up from his display. "Primitive species always choose the hard path first. They think their stubborn pride will somehow overcome reality." Director Zalmos activated his own data device and sent files to the Admiral's display. "Our intelligence reports are complete. Human military capabilities are even weaker than we initially assessed." The holographic display changed to show detailed images of human ships. They looked crude compared to Zephyrian vessels, with thick armor plating and simple weapon systems. The largest human ship was barely half the size of a standard Imperial cruiser. Their fastest ships can barely reach half the speed of our slowest cargo haulers, Director Zalmos continued. Their weapons use chemical explosives and primitive energy beams. Our shields can absorb their strongest attacks without even flickering. Admiral Kethver nodded as he studied the human fleet composition. How many ships do they have in total? Our agents count approximately 300 vessels of all types scattered across their territory. Most are patrol ships or transports. They have perhaps 50 ships that could be considered warships by the most generous definition. 300 ships, Admiral Kethver repeated, shaking his massive head. The Empire has over 10,000 ships in active service. We could overwhelm them with a single battle group. The briefing room doors opened and Emperor Thexelon entered, followed by his personal guard. The Emperor was larger than even Admiral Kethver, with scales that seemed to absorb light and eyes like burning coals. When he spoke, his voice made the walls vibrate. "Show me the plan for dealing with the human problem," Emperor Thexelon commanded. Admiral Kethver gestured to the display, which shifted to show a tactical overview of human space. The operation will proceed in 3 phases, Your Imperial Majesty. Phase 1 involves simultaneous strikes on all major human naval assets. We will destroy their ships before they can organize any resistance. Red arrows appeared on the display, showing Imperial fleets moving toward human positions from multiple directions. The arrows converged on human colonies like the claws of some great predator. Phase 2 will be the occupation of major population centers, Admiral Kethver continued. Human civilians will be relocated to designated areas while we establish proper imperial administration. Their primitive governments will be dissolved. And Phase 3? Emperor Thexelon asked. The installation of puppet governments loyal to the Empire. We will select suitable humans to serve as local administrators under imperial oversight. This approach has worked successfully with 17 other species. Director Zalmos stepped forward. Our psychological profile suggests that humans will adapt quickly to imperial rule once they see resistance is futile. They appear to be a practical species despite their current stubbornness. Emperor Thexelon studied the tactical display with the patience of someone who had conquered dozens of star systems. How long will this operation require? 2 standard months at most, Your Imperial Majesty, Admiral Kethver replied. The actual fighting should be over within weeks. The remainder of the time will be needed for administrative tasks and ensuring compliance. 2 months, Emperor Thexelon said, his voice carrying satisfaction. Less time than we needed to subdue the Rillan Confederacy, and they had twice as many ships as the humans. The comparison was apt. The Rillan Confederacy had been considered a regional power before the Empire decided their territory would be better managed under imperial rule. Their fleets had lasted exactly 18 days against imperial forces. There is one concern, Your Imperial Majesty, Director Zalmos said carefully. The humans did walk away from the peace talks. This shows a level of defiance that could inspire other species to question imperial authority. Emperor Thexelon's eyes blazed brighter, which is exactly why this human problem must be resolved quickly and decisively. Other species must see what happens when lesser civilizations refuse to accept their proper place in the galactic order. Admiral Kethver activated a different section of the display, showing the positions of Imperial battle fleets throughout the galaxy. I recommend we use the 3rd, 7th, and 12th battle groups for this operation. That will give us overwhelming superiority while keeping our other fleets available for normal patrol duties. Do it, Emperor Thexelon commanded. Begin fleet movements immediately. I want human space under Imperial control before the next council session. The other species need to see that defying the Empire has consequences. As the Emperor left the briefing room, Admiral Kethver began issuing orders to his staff. Throughout the massive tower, communication arrays activated to send encrypted messages to Imperial fleets across the galaxy. Battle groups that had been patrolling peaceful sectors suddenly received new orders and began changing course toward human territory. What none of the Zephyrians knew was that Captain Danny Roberts sat in a communications monitoring station 3 levels below the briefing room. His Zephyrian disguise was perfect, created by human scientists who had studied captured equipment for years. His position in the Imperial intelligence network gave him access to the most sensitive military communications. As Admiral Kethvar S. Orders went out to the Imperial fleets. Captain Roberts recorded every detail. Fleet positions, timetables, attack plans, troop deployments, everything the Empire planned to do to humanity was being transmitted back to Earth through carefully hidden quantum communication links. The irony was that the Zephyrians had helped human intelligence services by dismissing human capabilities so completely. They never imagined that the primitive humans could have agents deep inside their own command structure. They never suspected that human technology might be more advanced than it appeared. They never considered that a species capable of reaching the stars might also be capable of deception. Captain Roberts watched the tactical displays showing Imperial fleets beginning their movement toward human space. On the screens, the red arrows pointed like spears toward the small blue dots representing human colonies. The Empire's plan looked perfect, unstoppable, inevitable, but Captain Roberts knew something the Zephyrians did not. Those small blue dots on their maps were not helpless targets waiting to be conquered. They were carefully prepared positions in what was about to become the largest trap in galactic history. 3 days later, Emperor Thexelon addressed the galaxy from his throne room. The message was broadcast to every world in Imperial space and transmitted to all known alien civilizations. The human species has chosen defiance over wisdom, his voice thundered across the stars. Within 60 days, their rebellion will be crushed and order will be restored. Let this serve as a reminder to all species that the Empire's mercy has limits. As the Emperor's words spread throughout the galaxy, Imperial battle fleets accelerated toward human space, confident in their overwhelming superiority and the weakness of their opponents. They had no idea they were flying into the most carefully prepared ambush in the history of interstellar warfare. The Luna Command Center was buried 3 miles beneath the surface of Earth's moon. Its corridors stretched through solid rock like the veins of some massive creature, connecting war rooms and communication centers and weapon storage facilities that most humans never knew existed. This was where humanity's real military leaders worked, far from the public eye and the prying censors of alien intelligence services. President Maria Santos stood in the main command center, watching holographic displays that showed the movement of every ship within 100 light-years of Earth. The displays painted a grim picture. Red icons representing Zephyrian battle fleets were converging on human space from 3 different directions, moving like the jaws of a trap closing around everything humanity had built among the stars. Captain Roberts' final transmission came through 80 minutes ago, Fleet Admiral Chris Taylor said as he approached the president. His weathered face showed the strain of the past few days, but his voice remained steady. The Zephyrians will begin their attack in approximately 18 hours. President Santos nodded without taking her eyes off the tactical display. She had been expecting this moment for years, ever since humanity first encountered the Zephyrian Empire and realized that peaceful coexistence might not be possible. Now the moment had arrived, and she felt strangely calm. "Activate Protocol 7, she said quietly. Admiral Taylor's hand moved to a secure communication panel. Protocol 7 was humanity's most classified military contingency plan, developed over decades by the brightest minds in Earth's armed forces. Only a handful of people in the entire galaxy knew it existed, and even fewer understood its full scope throughout human space. Hidden transmitters began broadcasting coded signals. On colony worlds that appeared defenseless, massive blast doors opened in mountainsides to reveal weapons platforms that could crack planets. Space stations that looked like simple mining facilities shed their outer hulls to expose military-grade armor and enough firepower to level cities. Most importantly, in shipyards hidden throughout the outer solar systems, construction bays began opening to reveal the true human fleet. "General Phillips, please brief the President on current fleet status," Admiral Taylor said. General Kate Phillips, activated her datapad and the main display changed to show ship positions throughout human territory. But instead of the few hundred vessels the Zephyrians expected to find, the display showed thousands of contacts scattered across dozens of star systems. The Zephyrians were correct about one thing, General Phillips said with a slight smile. Our visible fleet consists of approximately 300 ships. However, those vessels were specifically designed to appear primitive while we built our real fleet in secret. President Santos studied the new display with satisfaction. How long have we been preparing for this? Construction began immediately. After our first contact with the Zephyrian Empire 12 years ago, General Phillips replied, "Our intelligence services determined that conflict was inevitable given their expansion patterns and attitude toward other species." The display zoomed in to show detailed schematics of human warships. These vessels looked nothing like the crude designs Zephyrian spies had observed. They were sleek and deadly, built with technology that had been developed in secret research facilities across human space. "Dr. Clark, please explain our technological advantages." Admiral Taylor said. Dr. Ryan Clark stepped forward, his excitement barely contained despite the serious situation. "The Zephyrians believe human technology is primitive because that's exactly what we wanted them to believe. Our visible ships use deliberately outdated systems while our real fleet incorporates advances they've never seen." The display shifted to show weapon systems that looked more like works of art than instruments of war. Our quantum displacement weapons can bypass energy shields entirely by shifting their target molecules into parallel dimensional space. Our adaptive missile swarms use artificial intelligence to counter enemy defenses in real time. President Santos walked closer to the display, studying the technical specifications. "What about their numerical advantage? They still have more ships than we do." "Numbers become irrelevant when the enemy can't hit your ships or penetrate your defenses," Dr. Clark replied. "Our vessels can move faster than Zephyrian sensors can track, and our weapons can destroy their largest ships with single shots." General Phillips activated another section of the display. "More importantly, we won't be fighting a defensive war. Operation Broken Chain calls for strategic withdrawal from forward positions while our long-range strike forces attack Zephyrian supply lines and home territories." The tactical display showed the plan in detail. Human colonies would appear to fall quickly, drawing Zephyrian forces deeper into prepared kill zones. Meanwhile, human strike fleets would emerge from hidden positions to attack the Empire's infrastructure and fleet bases. "The Zephyrians expect us to defend our colonies directly," General Phillips continued. "Instead, we'll let them occupy empty positions while we destroy their ability to maintain forces so far from home." Admiral Taylor pulled up communication logs from across human space. "Our colony governors have been evacuating civilian populations to underground shelters for the past week. The Zephyrians will find our worlds occupied, but they won't find the massive civilian casualties they're expecting to use for leverage." President Santos felt a surge of pride as she realized the scope of humanity's preparation. While the Zephyrians had spent years dismissing human capabilities, humanity had spent those same years getting ready for exactly this confrontation. "There's one more thing," Dr. Clark said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The Zephyrians believe they understand human psychology based on our diplomatic behavior. They think we're a peaceful species that will surrender quickly when faced with overwhelming force." "And they're wrong?" President Santos asked, though she already knew the answer. "They're catastrophically wrong," Dr. Clark replied. "Humans are peaceful by choice, not by nature. We spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare on Earth before we ever reached the stars. We know how to fight better than any species in the galaxy because we've been doing it longer than anyone else." The main display shifted to show historical data about human military development. Thousands of years of constant warfare, technological innovation driven by survival needs, tactical evolution through countless conflicts. The Zephyrians conquered other species that had been peaceful for millennia, General Phillips added. "They've never fought an enemy that chose peace after mastering War. President Santos walked to the center of the command room, looking up at the displays showing the approaching Zephyrian fleets. In a few hours, those fleets would begin attacking human positions, expecting to find frightened civilians and outdated defensive systems. Instead, they would discover that humanity's greatest deception was not hiding their military strength, but hiding their military nature. Open a channel to all human colonies and military commands. President Santos said communication arrays across human space activated, creating a secure network that connected every human settlement from Earth to the furthest frontier outposts. President Santos' image appeared on screens throughout human territory, her calm presence reassuring millions of people who were about to see their worlds become battlefields. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice carrying the weight of history. "We offered the Zephyrian Empire friendship and received arrogance in return. We extended our hand in peace and they demanded our knees in submission. Today they will learn why our species survived the crucible of Earth." The transmission ended, but throughout human space, military commanders were already implementing plans that had been rehearsed hundreds of times. Weapons came online that had never been fired in anger. Ships emerged from hiding places that had been prepared for years. Soldiers took positions in defense networks that spanned entire star systems. The Zephyrian Empire was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers or their courage, though they had all of those in abundance. Humanity's greatest strength was that they were very, very good at war. The first Zephyrian battle group dropped out of hyperspace near the human colony of New Brisbane with the confidence of hunters approaching helpless prey. Admiral Kethver watched from the bridge of his flagship as the tactical display showed. The human settlement spread across the surface of a green world that looked almost like Earth. "Scan for defensive installations," he ordered his weapons officer. "Detecting minimal orbital defenses, Admiral," came the reply. "3 small platforms and what appears to be a patrol ship. Standard human design, no threat to our forces." Admiral Kethver nodded with satisfaction. The intelligence reports had been accurate. Human defenses were as primitive as expected. "Begin the bombardment. Destroy all military targets, then demand surrender from the colonial government." The Zephyrian ships opened fire with energy beams that could melt mountains. The orbital platforms exploded into brilliant clouds of metal and fire. The lone patrol ship tried to flee but was vaporized by a single shot from a Zephyrian cruiser. Within minutes, every visible human military asset was destroyed. "Send a surrender demand," Admiral Kethver commanded, but as the transmission went out, something unexpected happened. The cargo ships in orbit around New Brisbane began to change. Their hulls split open like flowers blooming, revealing hidden weapon arrays and armor plating underneath. What had appeared to be simple merchant vessels transformed into warships bristling with weapons that Admiral Kethver had never seen before. "Incoming fire!" the tactical officer shouted. But the warning came too late. The UES Retribution had been disguised as a bulk cargo hauler for 3 years, sitting in orbit around New Brisbane and waiting for exactly this moment. Captain Alex Stone watched his targeting systems lock onto the lead Zephyrian ship and smiled. "Fire all quantum torpedoes," he ordered. The weapons that emerged from the Retribution's hidden bays moved faster than Zephyrian sensors could track. They passed through the Empire's energy shields as if those shields did not exist, striking the flagship's hull with enough force to split the massive vessel in half. Admiral Kethver had just enough time to see his ship's bridge collapsing around him before the explosion consumed everything. The battle for New Brisbane lasted exactly 7 minutes. When it ended, 12 Zephyrian warships had been destroyed and the survivors were fleeing in panic toward the edge of the system. The human losses were 0. Similar scenes played out across human space as the Zephyrian assault began. At Volf 359, General Vexter led a fleet of 50 ships against what intelligence reported was a lightly defended mining operation. Instead, he found Admiral Morrison waiting with the 3rd Fleet. "Remember me, General?" Admiral Morrison said. Over the communication channel as human ships emerged from behind asteroids where they had been hiding for weeks. I'm the primitive ape you were so eager to dismiss. The Zephyrian ships tried to form battle lines, but human vessels moved with a speed and agility that made coherent tactics impossible. Lieutenant Sarah Kim led a squadron of fighters that seemed to dance between Zephyrian energy beams, striking with precision weapons that could disable ships 10 times their size. How are they moving so fast? General Vexler demanded of his tactical officer. Unknown, sir. Our sensors show them changing direction at accelerations that should kill any organic crew. What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that human pilots had been training in extreme gravity environments and virtual reality systems for decades. Their reflexes had been honed by centuries of competitive sports and gaming that pushed human coordination to its absolute limits. Where other species saw impossible maneuvers, humans saw Tuesday morning training exercises. The Third Fleet demonstrated tactical innovations that left Zephyrian commanders speechless. Admiral Morrison used gravity wells as weapons, dropping enemy ships into the coronas of nearby stars. Human vessels coordinated attacks with a precision that seemed almost telepathic, striking simultaneously from multiple directions to overwhelm Zephyrian defenses. Fall back, General Vexler finally ordered, but the retreat came too late. Human ships had surrounded his fleet using hyperspace jumps that appeared and disappeared faster than Zephyrian sensors could track. When the battle ended, only 3 Zephyrian vessels escaped to tell the tale. Throughout the Empire's territory, reports flooded in of similar disasters. The assault on human space had not just failed, it had been turned into a massacre of Imperial forces. Worse still, human ships were appearing deep inside Zephyrian territory, striking at targets that should have been impossible to reach. The UES Vengeance emerged from hyperspace, directly above the Zephyrian naval base at Kepler Station. The base's commander had barely enough time to send a distress signal before quantum torpedoes reduced the entire facility to glowing debris. Similar attacks hit Imperial shipyards, supply depots, and communication centers across a dozen star systems. Captain Stone's ship had become a legend among human forces in just a few hours of combat. The Retribution moved through space like a predator hunting prey, appearing without warning to destroy Zephyrian ships and then vanishing before enemy reinforcements could arrive. "Target the command cruiser," Captain Stone ordered as his ship approached another Zephyrian patrol. "Let's send Admiral Keffer's replacement a message about what happens when you threaten human colonies." The quantum torpedoes struck with surgical precision, crippling the enemy ship without destroying it completely. As Zephyrian escape pods launched into space, Captain Stone opened a communication channel to the survivors. "Tell your commanders that humanity remembers every insult, every threat, every demand for submission," he said. "We offered you peace and you chose war. Now you'll learn the difference between a species that can't fight and a species that chooses not to." On Dominax, Emperor Thexelon stared at reports that seemed impossible to believe. In less than one day, the Empire had lost over 200 ships and a dozen major installations. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were winning decisively against forces that outnumbered them 10 to 1. "How is this possible?" he demanded of Director Zalmost. "Our intelligence was incomplete, Your Imperial Majesty," the intelligence director replied, his voice shaking with fear. "The humans have technology we never detected and capabilities we never imagined." "Find me answers," Emperor Vexelon roared. "Find me a way to stop them before they destroy everything we've built." But across the galaxy, human forces were already moving to their next targets. The war that was supposed to last 2 months and result in complete human surrender had instead become a demonstration of why underestimating humanity was the most dangerous mistake any species could make. In the depths of space, Admiral Morrison's Third Fleet regrouped after the destruction of General Vexler's forces. The Admiral looked at the tactical displays showing Zephyrian territory spread out like a map of future victories. "Set course for the Imperial shipyards at Vega Prime," he ordered. "It's time to show the Empire what happens when you mistake humanity's desire for peace as an inability to wage war." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of Zephyrian arrogance and carrying with them the promise of much more destruction to come. The Imperial Palace on Dominax had never been designed for siege warfare. Its beautiful towers and gleaming walls were meant to inspire awe in visiting diplomats, not to withstand bombardment from enemy fleets. Now human ships hung in orbit above the capital world like dark stars, their weapons trained on the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. Emperor Vexilon stood in his throne room, watching through massive windows as debris from his once mighty orbital defense platforms burned up in the atmosphere like falling meteors. 6 weeks had passed since the war began, and in that time the Empire had lost more than half its total fleet strength. Worse still, 3 entire star systems had declared independence, their governors unwilling to fight for an empire that could no longer protect them. "Your Imperial Majesty," Director Zalmo said as he entered the throne room, his scales pale with fear, "Chancellor Morden is requesting immediate communication from Concordia Prime. The Galactic Council is demanding emergency sessions." The Emperor turned from the window, his burning eyes dimmed by defeat. "What does the Council want?" "They want to broker new peace terms with humanity before the war spreads further. Several species are already withdrawing their support for Imperial expansion policies." Emperor Vexilon laughed, but the sound held no humor. "Peace terms. 6 weeks ago we were dictating surrender conditions to the humans. Now we're begging them to stop destroying everything we built." The communication array activated, and Chancellor Morden's image appeared in the throne room. The tall alien's gray skin seemed even more colorless than usual, and his voice carried the desperation of someone watching the collapse of galactic order. "Your Imperial Majesty, the situation has become critical. Human forces have blockaded 4 more star systems, and their deep strike fleets are operating freely throughout what was previously secure Imperial space. The Council must act before other species begin questioning fundamental power structures. What are you proposing?" Emperor Vexilon asked, though he already knew the answer would taste like poison. "President Santos has agreed to cease fire negotiations, but she insists they be conducted aboard a human vessel under human security protocols. The terms will begin with full recognition of current human territorial claims." The irony was not lost on anyone in the throne room. The same terms humanity had originally offered in good faith were now being presented as starting points for negotiations that the Empire would be lucky to survive. "Arrange the meeting," Emperor Vexilon said quietly. 3 days later, General Vexter sat in the prisoner exchange facility aboard the human diplomatic vessel Use Harmony. Across from him sat Admiral Morrison, the same human officer he had mocked as a primitive ape just 2 months earlier. The general's massive frame seemed somehow smaller now, bent by the weight of defeats that had cost him everything he believed about Zephyrian superiority. "I never understood," General Vexter said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your ships, your weapons, your tactics, how did we miss all of it?" Admiral Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying the alien who had once seemed so confident and threatening. "You missed it because you wanted to miss it. You saw what you expected to see instead of what was really there. But your technology, it appeared so primitive." "It was supposed to appear primitive," Admiral Morrison replied. "Every ship you observed, every weapon system you analyzed, every piece of equipment your spies reported, on all of it was designed to look exactly as weak as you thought we were?" General Vexter raised his scaled head, confusion evident in his yellow eyes. "But why? Why hide your true capabilities?" "Because an enemy who underestimates you is an enemy who makes mistakes. You spent years planning to fight the humans you thought we were instead of preparing for the humans we actually are." The prisoner exchange continued in silence for several minutes. When it finished, General Vexter was loaded onto a Zephyrian transport ship along with the other survivors of his failed campaign. As his ship departed, he could see human vessels throughout the system, their sleek forms a constant reminder of how completely he had misunderstood his opponents. Meanwhile, in the main conference room of the UES Harmony, President Santos sat, across from Chancellor Morden and the representatives of 11 other galactic species. The same chamber that had once dismissed humanity's reasonable requests now listened with careful attention to every word she spoke. The territorial adjustments we're requesting are quite simple, President Santos said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone holding all the advantages. Full recognition of human sovereignty over all currently occupied systems, plus the 3 disputed territories that were the original cause of this conflict. Chancellor Morden activated his datapad with trembling fingers. And the tribute. Payments that were previously demanded will now flow in the opposite direction. The Zephyrian Empire will provide reparations for the unprovoked attack on human territory, plus compensation for the military expenses we incurred defending ourselves. The representatives from other species exchanged glances. They had watched the Empire's fleets be systematically destroyed by humans they had thought were barely capable of space travel. The revelation that humanity possessed both advanced technology and exceptional military skill had forced every species to recalculate their assumptions about galactic power structures. What assurance can you provide that human expansion will respect existing territorial boundaries? Asked the representative from the Altarian Federation. President Santos smiled, and something in that expression reminded everyone present of Admiral Morrison's smile in the original peace talks. Humanity has no interest in conquest. We never did. We wanted to be neighbors, not rulers. That hasn't changed. But your military capabilities, began another representative, will be used to maintain the peace we originally sought, President Santos finished. The difference is that peace will now be enforced on terms that respect human sovereignty and dignity. Chancellor Morden looked around the conference table at faces that had once been confident in their support for Imperial policies. Now those same faces showed the uncertainty of species that had discovered their understanding of galactic politics was dangerously incomplete. These terms are acceptable to the Council, Chancellor Morden said finally. President Santos nodded graciously. Excellent. I believe this arrangement will serve everyone's interests much better than the previous approach. As the formal negotiations continued, the real message was being transmitted throughout the galaxy by the simple fact of where they were taking place. Humanity was no longer asking for a seat at the galactic table, they were providing the table and determining who got to sit at it. The signing ceremony took place 3 hours later in the same conference room where humanity had been dismissed as irrelevant. President Santos stood to address the assembled representatives, her words being broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. 6 weeks ago, the Zephyrian Empire made the mistake of believing that a peaceful species was necessarily a weak species. They learned that there is a profound difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight. She paused, looking around the room at faces that now watched her with respect instead of dismissal. Humanity sought peace as equals and was told we must accept it as subjects. Today we establish peace as the dominant military power in this galaxy. Let this serve as a lesson that underestimating those who offer friendship in good faith is the most dangerous mistake any civilization can make. A treaty was signed in silence, each representative understanding that they were witnessing the end of one galactic order and the beginning of another. The Zephyrian Empire would survive, but as a regional power under human oversight. Other species would maintain their independence, but with the clear understanding that challenging humanity's position would be both futile and catastrophic. As the ceremony concluded and the representatives departed, President Santos remained in the conference room, looking out at the stars through the ship's massive windows. The galaxy looked the same as it had 2 months ago, but everything had changed. Humanity had not sought to become the dominant power among the stars, but they had accepted that responsibility when others forced it upon them. The greatest irony was that the Zephyrian Empire's fatal mistake had been the most human thing about them. They had seen what they wanted to see instead of what was really there. In their arrogance, they had mistaken humanity's hope for peace as evidence of inability to wage war, never realizing that a species capable of surviving its own violent history while maintaining faith in something better was the most dangerous opponent they could possibly face.